Hey, it's Tanya, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, in case you didn't know. And today I wanted to talk about my life with bipolar disorder. And it's just something that I've really struggled with over time with the stigma that's around it. And I just wanted people to realize that normal people can have this. A lot of media is trying to show all of these horror stories of bipolar disorder. And in reality, it is something that is treatable if you learn and find it early. You can defeat it. You can keep on going in life, even though you have the disorder. So, first of all, I wanted to talk about what is bipolar disorder, because a lot of people ask me when I tell them that I have it, what is bipolar disorder and how does it affect you? So one thing that I will recommend is there's a book called The Bipolar Disorder Survival Guide. And I will list it down below, but it's something that I've read through, and I've taken notes during it. You'll kind of see through it, but it's something that you just kind of need to educate yourself about a little. And if that's watching this video, great. If you're interested in learning more, he's written a fantastic book. It's going to be listed below. Something that's important for bipolar disorder is you're not alone. There's other people that have it. There's not a whole lot of us, but we can manage it and not have this stigma around us that's putting us in a box. So a lot of what this book is talking about is it's a chemical imbalance in somebody's brain. It's not that they are just a psycho. It's not that they are, crazy. It's just that we have a chemical imbalance that makes us very high and very happy and great and amazing sometimes, and then very low other times. So we get depressed. We have major depression-like symptoms. And so with his book, he goes through and he says, this means that people with bipolar disorder have genetically influenced problems with information processing in the synapses, the space between nerve cells and circuits, the neurological connections between the brain structure and others, rather than too much or too little of a certain chemical. So it's just some things have developed a little bit differently in some people than others. And it also can come up in different ways. So again, in the book on a different page, he's talking about how it's very common to be genetically passed on. So I read somewhere the other day in this book that it was saying that 1% of the general population has bipolar 1 disorder. And so again, it's not extremely common, but we can get it through passing it on through the genes. It can be from family scenarios, so like trauma in your background, or it says inconsistencies with medications, other genetic, biological, or environmental factors. So it's not just because your parents have had it. It's something that you could have, just something has formed a little bit differently. But it's a mood disorder. It's something that makes us kind of ebb and flow. And the disorder itself ebbs and flows as well. It's not like it's always high, it's always low. It can be just consistent. You can be just fine. It's just you have to learn how to manage it. Something I've noticed with bipolar disorder is you have symptoms of other diagnoses. So for example, I get anxiety-like symptoms, but I'm not diagnosed with anxiety. Or I get OCD-like symptoms, but I don't have OCD, or I have depression symptoms, but I don't have depression, and various ons and ons kind of things. So there is a difference in bipolar disorders. There's a bipolar 1 disorder and a bipolar 2 disorder. There's a difference because there's a difference of mania. So for example, some people have a manic episode, and that's something where you're extremely high. And I'll talk about like the symptoms of it because I'm going to go through my symptoms at some point. But it depends how long you've had one. So if you have bipolar 1 disorder, you've had a full manic episode. And if you have bipolar 2 disorder, you've had a hypomanic episode. So it's not as strong and it hasn't lasted as long. So I have the bipolar 1 disorder. It's the one where you've had a longer manic episode. So let's talk about my symptoms. And I've kind of made a list so that I can, go through and say all of the things that I've kind of been thinking of for some time. I mean, these can vary for people, but for my manic episodes, the main thing that I've noticed is I cannot stop talking. And that's one of my main first triggers to notice that I'm having a manic episode is it's quite literally like a stream of consciousness. I can't stop myself from talking. Nobody knows. It's almost like you can't get me to stop, and I keep talking like this, and it's like you can't follow my conversation very well. And so, for example, the first time I ever had one, I was with my mama and papa. I'm not much of a talker when I'm around family. I've become more talkative over like the last few years, but it was the most they've ever heard me speak in my life, and they're like, what's going on? So it's something where you quite literally can't turn it off. It's like a spigot. It's also like this strange moodiness. It's kind of like the world isn't moving fast enough for you. So you're on a 10 and the world is just going at a snail's pace. So for example, if I'm working on a project, I'm working on 15 different projects. I'm bouncing between them and I can do all of them still at the same time. I don't know why it's like a restlessness that you can't like get out of your system. It's just got to keep go, 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 go kind of thing. And so it's really interesting because I can get a lot done. I don't sleep because it's just like my brain can't turn off. I can't stop thinking. And it's like this for at least a week or longer. And your body without sleep doesn't do so great. But my body runs off of a couple hours, and that's not great for a bipolar person. I will go over that a little bit later. It's just like a constant go, go, go. That causes me to get very exhausted very quickly, especially when you're like boom, 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 like all over the place. So you start to get moody just because you're grumpy because you're tired, basically. But another thing that I do that's not great in my manic episodes is I spend money. I spend a lot and I spend it fast. And so it's just something that I don't know. It's almost like I'll talk about it a little bit later. I get these OCD-like symptoms where I can't turn off my brain, and it's like I need something, and it's in the back of my head. It's almost like when you have a thought on the tip of your tongue and you can't quite get it out, but it's this thing in the back of my head that I need something. I don't know what it is, so I have to buy all these things. And usually the things are not what it is. And in fact, every time I bought something, it's never what it is. And I don't think it actually is a thing. I think it's just my brain telling me I need something when I really don't. I start to like hyper focus on things, especially with those like OCD like symptoms. I hyper focus, and a lot of my manic episodes have OCD like tendencies. Again, I am not diagnosed with OCD. I would not wish that on anyone because those are some of my least favorite symptoms that I get. It's just like this intense pressure, and I don't know how to explain it better, but it's like nothing will satisfy it and nothing can satisfy it. And I really struggle with that. So those of you that have OCD, I really feel for you. I can't quite understand, but I get the occasional stuff like it. So I have a lot of empathy for you. Going back to manic episodes, once I get really bad, and I say really bad, it's just like sometimes it gets out of hand. And that's when my therapist gets concerned, or like my psychiatrist, because it's when I start getting almost like psychosis like symptoms. Like if you've ever seen The Truman Show, it's this story about this guy who lives in a world. They built this entire dome and a world around him, and it's a TV show that owns him. They're like his biological parents. Somehow they like adopted him or something, I don't know. Anyway, and like the whole world is revolving around him. When I get in like really bad, sometimes I'll get in situations where I think the world is revolving around me, and I think that the world is my show. And so it's almost like I get very confident and I start thinking that I am the stuff. I'm like a lot better than I really am, kind of thing. But it's just like I'm invincible and the world is my show. I don't know. And I'm not like that generally. Normally I'm like, ooh, no attention should be on me. But when I'm in those scenarios, I think that the world is about me and it should be. And it's strange. I try not to show it to people. I try not to like show it while I'm out and about, but it's almost like when I walk around my house, I think there's cameras and like, oh, gotta pose for the picture. Like, I haven't had that happen very often. That's when I'm like, my meds are really messed up. But again, we'll get into like how to manage things a little bit later. Anyway, mania, I would boil it down to restlessness. You cannot sit still. And you're like, everything's wonderful. If you've ever heard of the rose-colored glasses, everything's great. Everything's wonderful. My life is going so wonderful and it's great and everything's great. So that's mania if you want it in a like PG terms. So then the low side of that is literally when you start going down is like the major depressive symptoms. And that's when you get very depressed and it's hard to get out of bed. It's very hard to live life like an average person. That's when the self-esteem drops really bad. Unlike the mania where I think I'm really hot and smoking. And in this case, I think I'm as cold as a freezer because I just don't think well of myself. I don't think positive, wonderful, lovely things. I'm feeling like worthless. I'm feeling sometimes to the point where we're thinking bad thoughts about ourselves and bad thoughts about things like that. And so it's something that's really confusing when you go from a really high to a really low. Normally I have a little bit of an in-between where I plateau for a second and then go down, but it's really hard when you go from like this high to this low. A lot of times when people have bipolar disorder, they go to like drugs and alcohol, and I'm not saying that I do that. I'm not saying that every bipolar person does that, but they want to keep the high because when you're up here and you're doing great, you want it to stay because you're very successful, you're doing a lot of things, you're getting a lot done. Like I make a lot of YouTube videos when I'm manic because I can crank them out. And so when you get in the low, you don't want to do it. Like I have no interest in making any videos. I have no interest in doing my hobbies. I don't want to do anything that makes me happy. I just want to sit there and kind of be a vegetable. I don't want to take my dogs for a walk. I don't really want to be around anybody. And so bipolar disorder is confusing. It really is. And that's something I've really struggled with it is the confusion of like, what's going on? What's happening? Obviously, I get like anxiety-like symptoms with it. I feel like a lot of people get anxiety. You feel like you drink a bunch of caffeine and it's sitting on your chest, or like you feel this pressure and you can't quite figure out where it's coming from, but it sits in your tummy. And sometimes I have anxiety attacks where they actually turn into an asthma attack. That's just because I have medical problems, but those are not fun. Anxiety is just kind of built in to all of that. It's a lot of confusing and a lot of like confusing feelings and thoughts. I would say the most common thing for me though is I'm rapid cycling. I bounce from high to low, high to low, high to low, high to low. And the goal of bipolar disorder is getting in that medium range where you're trying to get either medicated or get on like a regimen that helps you be able to stay flat. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But my common things is I'm just kind of an irritable person sometimes, and my goal is to watch myself and try to notice if I'm getting like that. I try to get more sleep or different things like that, and again we'll talk about other strategies. I just don't like it when I get in the major depression and I get like apathy and I have no empathy for others, and I think like the world around me is collapsing. I do have disassociation. I don't know if that has to do with my PTSD as a separate diagnosis. I had that beforehand, and it takes a while to get diagnosed to be bipolar because it can show up as the other things if you're correctly diagnosed. Let's get into that. How was I diagnosed with bipolar disorder? The main thing I want you to know is I am not a mental health professional. I just deal with it. I have problems. I get it. But my one thing that I would highly recommend, my tip would be make sure that you are getting diagnosed by an appropriate and qualified professional. So that's a therapist, that is a psychiatrist, that's a psychologist. Like I have said throughout the time, your symptoms look like other diagnoses sometimes. They kind of vary and they can look like other things. So it takes some time to get diagnosed correctly. I worked with my therapist for years before we did that. Now I was a little bit weird. I told her, don't diagnose me with anything unless we 100% know. So that is one of those things that is important to seek assistance in that. So again, my tips of the day would be in consistent therapy, because a lot of bipolar disorder is being self-aware and trying to notice when you're having these symptoms and knowing like, oh, I'm getting manic, so I need to talk to my therapist or my psychiatrist to figure out what we need to do to get me back to the plateau. Because one thing with bipolar disorder, it doesn't get better as you go. It's something that you need to learn to manage when you're younger, because as you get older, as things get worse, manic episodes will last longer as you go, and so you want to manage it while you can, and so it doesn't continue to get worse as you age. Now, that's something that I've been told. I didn't see that in the book, but I didn't. It's a big book. It took me a while. So anyway, another thing is just don't assume that you have a diagnosis because you have some of the symptoms, because that's something where you can self-diagnose yourself anytime, but we have to be really careful with what we're self-diagnosing ourselves with. And again, learn to become self-aware. And a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist are there to help you learn those skills to learn how to become self-aware. The next thing is, some people choose to be medicated. I'm medicated just because I have learned that it is a chemical thing for me. It's not something that I can control on my own, and I've really tried. It's something that a medication helps me get in that baseline so that I can not spend thousands of dollars. That's something that is just not okay for my family and my situation. I don't have the money to do that. I can't just go blow all my money in a sitting, kind of like that. And so again, we're also wanting to lessen our future potential of having worsened symptoms in the future. Something else that's very important is putting rules in place with your loved ones, because for me, when I start spending the money, I start spending those big dollars. My husband and I have put in a rule, aka I pick the rule, because I won't follow it if I don't make the rule, because I'm that person. But I set a rule with him like, hey, if it's over this many dollars, then I have to approve it with you before I can buy anything. And it really helps that OCD kind of thing in the back of my head where I'm thinking like, I have to have the thing, I have to get the thing, because most likely it's not the thing anyway. It's not going to satisfy that feeling. It's just something I get when I'm in that manic field. So again, set boundaries, figure out how to set boundaries with yourself and your family. My last most important thing that I would recommend is get good sleep. With bipolar disorder, it sounds so funny, but we need more sleep than the average people. We just need that to be able to be on a level playing ground with others. It truly matters, and we really need that to be successful. At least I do. But I don't know, if you have other questions or you have other things that you struggle with or experiences that you've experienced, feel free to put them down below in the comments, because I would love for this to be able to help people. I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have the qualifications to tell you what you do and do not have, but I would love to be able to help in the way of, these are the tips that I feel like might help you. So with that being said, that's all I really have to say. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Don't talk to strangers unless they give you candy, and I'll see you next time. Bye.